The first flames of war did not begin with soldiers or generals, but with whispers in a small village. Among the stars, great empires clashed, but here on the ground, it was the laughter of neighbors that cut deepest. They mocked her because she had chosen love over wealth, a poor man over princes, and a life of hardship over comfort. Yet no one knew that the same poor man would one day stand against the tide of war that threatened them all. His name was Darren, and he was as ordinary as any man could appear. His clothes were patched, his hands rough from labor, his tools older than memory. But his eyes held something the others missed, a fire that did not bend when storms came. The girl, Lyra, was born of noble blood. Her family wore jewels, commanded servants, and dined with rulers. But Lyra had turned her back on such things. To her, wealth without love was emptiness, and she saw in Darren a strength that no coin could measure. They whispered behind her back, saying she had thrown her life away. Yet she walked with her head high, even when her heart trembled. The unexpected war came suddenly. The sky lit up with fire one night, not from storms, but from ships falling. Alien fleets, dark and merciless, descended upon their world. Villages burned, fortresses fell, and even kings who mocked Darren and his poverty found themselves powerless against the invasion. The poor man who had nothing became the one who refused to run. When others fled, Darren stayed. He gathered the broken tools of farmers, bent metal, and wood. He shaped them into weapons, crude but strong enough to hold a line. People laughed at him once, but now in the shadow of war, they followed him because he did not tremble. Lyra stood by his side, her fine hands cut and bruised as she carried supplies, treated the wounded, and lifted the weak. The ones who mocked her marriage now looked upon her with new eyes, though pride kept their mouths silent. The first battle was not fought on fields of honor, but in the streets of their own homes. Alien soldiers marched through fire, their armor glowing, their eyes cold. Villagers screamed, mothers clutched children, and fathers fell under blades sharper than any human steel. Darren, the poor man, raised his makeshift spear. His shout carried not just words but a spirit, something raw and human that struck deeper than fear. Others answered, voices rising together. They pushed back not with skill but with heart. The aliens had numbers, weapons, and ships. Humans had only desperation. Yet when Darren fought, it was as if something greater moved through him. His arms did not tire, his eyes did not flinch. He stood where others fell, and soon the people realized they were not following a poor man, they were following a leader. Lyra, covered in dust and blood, saw it too. She had always known he was more than they believed. As the night stretched on, stories were born. Children whispered that the poor man's blade shone brighter than fire. Old men swore he stood against 10 soldiers and did not fall. Women carried his name like a prayer. Darren did not hear these things. He fought not for glory, but because he would not let his people be broken. He had nothing, and perhaps that was why he feared nothing. When dawn came, the village still stood. Bodies lay scattered, smoke rose to the heavens, but the people were alive. The invaders retreated for a time, regrouping, studying this resistance that should not have been possible. The villagers gathered, their eyes on Darren. Once they mocked him, laughed at Lyra for choosing him. Now silence fell heavy, for they could not deny the truth. The poor man had done what nobles could not. Lyra looked at him, not with surprise but with quiet pride. She had chosen him because she saw what no one else had seen. And now, fate itself had begun to prove her right. The war was far from over. Greater battles loomed, and the enemy would not rest until the world bent to their will. But in the heart of the poor man burned a defiance that no weapon could shatter. The people gathered behind him, waiting for his word. He said nothing at first, only stood with blood on his hands and fire in his eyes. Then he lifted his weapon and spoke with a voice steady as stone. "We will not bow. those 4 words became more than a vow. They became the seed of something greater, something that would grow beyond their small village. It was only the beginning, and no one yet knew how far fate would carry them. The village carried the scars of battle. Smoke still lingered in the air, walls were cracked, and the earth was dark with ash. Yet for the first time, the people looked at Darren not with laughter, but with respect. Children clung to their mothers, whispering his name like it was a shield. Old men who once spat at him now nodded in silence. Even the nobles who had mocked Lyra avoided her eyes, ashamed of their words. Darren did not celebrate. He stood among the broken houses, his spear leaning against his shoulder, his hands rough and bleeding. He knew this was not victory. The aliens had pulled back only to strike harder later. Their kind never stopped after one battle. They tested their enemies, studying weakness, learning how to break human spirit. Lyra came to him with a cloth to clean his wounds. Her eyes, though tired, still held light. "They follow you now," she said softly. "I am no leader," he answered. "I am just a man who refused to run. And that," she whispered, "is what makes you a leader." Before dawn fully rose, a horn echoed through the valley. Survivors from nearby villages staggered into the square. They were thin, their clothes burned, their eyes hollow. They told stories of alien soldiers dragging away prisoners, of cities crushed under fire from the sky. Some begged for food. Others begged for hope that the villagers turned to Darren. It was not by words but by silence that they asked him what should be done. He felt the weight of their stares and the burden of their trust. He had never been trained, had no riches, no army, no crown. Yet somehow, fate had placed this weight on his shoulders. He spoke slowly, his voice steady. "We cannot wait for kings to save us. We cannot hide and hope this storm passes. If we do nothing, they will return and take everything. We must fight not as one village but as a people." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Fear was heavy, but his words planted seeds of courage. Men offered their tools to be reforged into weapons. Women promised to gather supplies. Even children carried water and bandages, determined to help. Lyra stood taller beside him, her presence a quiet flame. Many remembered mocking her choice. Now watching the bond between her and Darren, they realized she had chosen not a poor man but a strength none of them possessed. That night, Darren and a small band scouted the hills. They found wreckage of alien ships, twisted metal scattered like bones. From it, Darren pulled pieces of strange alloy, stronger than steel, glowing faintly with energy. He studied it carefully, his hands moving with patience. Though untrained, his mind was sharp. He began to fashion blades and shields from the wreckage, crude but powerful enough to pierce alien armor. Lyra worked beside him, shaping what she could, encouraging those who doubted. "This is not the end," she told them. "This is the beginning." But the aliens were not blind. From their ships high above, they watched the defiance growing below. Commanders snarled in their strange tongue, ordering stronger forces to descend. They had crushed greater nations before. To them, humans were nothing but dust under their boots. Yet something in Darren's stand unsettled them, as if this poor man carried a spark that might ignite more than rebellion. On the third night, the sky burned again. Ships descended, larger and more deadly. Their engines roared like thunder, shaking the ground. Villagers gripped their new weapons with trembling hands. Some prayed. Others wept. Darren stood at the front, his spear of alien metal glowing faintly in the firelight. His heart pounded, but he did not waver. Lyra touched his arm once, her eyes steady. She did not need to speak. He already knew her faith. The soldiers of the invaders marched forward, their armor gleaming, their weapons humming with deadly light. The villagers braced for despair. But Darren raised his weapon high, and his voice rang clear. "They believe we are weak. Tonight, we show them we are unbroken." A roar answered him. The poor man, once laughed at, now stood as the pillar of hope. And when the aliens charged, he did not step back. He ran forward. The night sky glowed red as the alien army advanced. Their armor reflected the fire from burning homes. Their footsteps shook the ground like drums of doom. The villagers gripped their new weapons tighter, fear written on every face. Some could barely stand, but none turned away. They looked at Darren, the poor man they once mocked, and his presence gave them strength. Darren moved to the front line, his strange spear of alien alloy catching the light. He was not taller than the others, nor stronger, but there was something in the way he stood calm, unshaken, that made even the weakest feel braver. Lyra walked behind him, carrying bandages and water, her head high. To many, she looked more like a queen now than any noble lady who had hidden behind palace walls. The first clash came with a storm of light. The aliens fired their weapons, beams slicing through the dark. A farmer fell, his chest burned, but Darren shouted and charged. His cry cut through fear, pulling the rest with him. Metal struck metal, and screams filled the air. The poor villagers fought with desperation, every strike a refusal to surrender. Darren's spear tore through alien armor. It was not skill alone, it was will. He fought like a man who carried the weight of every family behind him. His arms burned, his legs shook, but he did not stop. Around him, others pushed harder, copying his courage. Even when wounds opened on his skin, he pressed on. Lyra saw him bleeding, but she knew stopping him was impossible. He was no longer just her husband. He was hope itself. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The ground was littered with broken bodies, both human and alien. Fires painted the night, and smoke burned in every breath. Yet, against all odds, the village still stood. The invaders retreated once again, their commanders shouting in anger, surprised that such weak humans could resist twice. When the battle ended, silence fell. The villagers looked at each other, too tired to cheer. They carried their wounded, mourned their dead, and gathered around the man who had led them. Darren stood exhausted, blood soaking his arm, but his eyes were sharp. He saw not victory but the truth. The enemy would return again, and next time they would not underestimate. That night, as the village tried to rest, Darren walked to the edge of the fields alone. Lyra followed quietly, her soft steps stopping beside him. "They will come back stronger," he said. His voice was low, heavy with the weight of what was to come. "Yes," Lyra answered, her hand brushing his. "But so will we." Darren turned to her, his face shadowed by the firelight. "You chose me when everyone mocked you. You saw something I never saw in myself. I fear I will fail them, Lyra. I fear I will fail you." She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You cannot fail, Darren. Even if you fall, your courage has already changed them. They mocked me for loving a poor man, but now they see what I always knew: you are richer than kings." Her words settled into him like steel. For the first time, he believed them. He was not just a poor man anymore. He was a leader, whether he wished for it or not. The following days were restless. Survivors from more villages arrived, drawn by rumors of the poor man who stood against the invaders. They came with nothing but broken tools and desperate eyes, asking to join him. Soon, what began as one small village became the seat of an army, but the enemy had also grown impatient. From the sky, their ships gathered, larger than mountains, blotting out the stars. The commanders whispered of destroying not just villages, but the entire land in one strike. They would crush the spark before it became a fire dot. As Darren trained the villagers, he looked up at the sky, seeing the shadows of warships. His grip tightened on his weapon. He knew the storm was near, and yet, as he turned back to his people, he saw something that filled him with strength. Men and women who once mocked him now trained with determination. Children ran supplies with pride. Lyra stood among them, her presence giving calm. For the first time, Darren realized they were no longer waiting for fate. They were creating it. Asterisk, the days of quiet did not bring peace, only tension. Every sunrise, the villagers looked to the sky, waiting for the enemy to descend. Children clutched their mothers' hands. Old men kept watch from rooftops, and even in sleep, people dreamed of shadows falling from above. Darren worked without rest. He reforged alien scraps into sharper weapons, taught farmers to fight as soldiers, and turned shepherds into watchmen. His hands bled from work, but he did not stop. To him, every hour wasted was a life lost. Lyra stayed close, her soft words lifting weary hearts. She walked among the people, listening, comforting, reminding them that they were not alone. Rumors spread faster than fire. Survivors from distant towns whispered that the alien commanders were preparing something greater. They spoke of ships larger than mountains and weapons that could burn an entire valley in one breath. Fear grew heavy again. Some villagers begged Darren to lead them into hiding. But he stood firm. "If we run," he said, "they will hunt us. If we hide, they will burn the earth above us. The only way to live is to stand." It was then the sky turned black. On the fourth night, a fleet of massive warships appeared, their shadows swallowing the stars. The ground trembled as their engines roared, and beams of red light carved through the clouds. From above, the alien commanders sent their message. Their voices thundered across the valley, translated by strange machines. "Humans, you are nothing. You will kneel, or you will burn." The people froze. Kneel or burn. It was the choice their kind had given to countless worlds before. Whole civilizations had been erased this way. For a moment, silence ruled, broken only by the hiss of fire from the alien ships. Then Darren stepped forward. He lifted his weapon toward the sky and shouted, his voice raw but unshaken. "We will not kneel." The villagers roared behind him, their voices carrying farther than the alien commanders expected. It was not just defiance, it was unity. Men, women, and even children shouted until the valley shook. And for the first time, the invaders hesitated. The attack came like a storm. Beams of light rained down, fire exploded across fields, and the air itself burned. Entire homes vanished in seconds, replaced by clouds of ash. The villagers scattered, shields raised, some crushed under falling stone. Yet even in chaos they fought back. Darren ran into the heart of the flames, striking alien soldiers who poured from the ships. His spear of alien alloy sliced through armor, sparks flying with every clash. He did not fight alone. The people who once mocked him now stood beside him, their fear burned away by the fire of his example. Farmers swung blades, mothers hurled stones, and children carried water to the wounded. Lyra worked among them, her white dress stained with soot and blood as she treated the injured. She moved like a spirit through the chaos, her calm touch giving strength where despair threatened to break hearts. When people looked into her eyes, they remembered why they still fought. The battle raged through the night. Whole streets collapsed, and the earth shook as alien machines crawled forward. Darren faced one of these war beasts, a towering machine bristling with weapons. Alone, he charged, leaping onto its frame. His hands burned as he tore at its armor, using the shard of alien steel to pierce its core. With a scream, he drove the shard deep, and the beast exploded in fire. The villagers cheered, their hope blazing even brighter, but the enemy was far from broken. From the command ship, alien leaders watched in silence. They had crushed empires greater than this. Yet this one poor man had turned peasants into warriors. They realized if this spark spread beyond the valley, it could light a fire across the whole world. "Break him," one commander hissed. "Break the poor man, and their hope will fall with him." As dawn broke, the warships pulled back, leaving the village in ruins but not destroyed. Darren stood in the rubble, chest heaving, his weapon blackened with blood and fire. Around him, People wept for the dead but also clung to one another. Against the strongest strike yet, they had survived. Darren knew this was not mercy. It was a test. The invaders would return, stronger, sharper, determined to shatter him. And when they came, he would be ready. The ruins of the village smoked for days. Ash covered the ground like snow, and the air carried the bitter stench of fire. People moved among the rubble, searching for food, pulling survivors from collapsed homes, and burying the fallen. Yet through grief, they stood taller than before. The invaders had struck with their strongest weapons, and still the poor man's people had not bowed. Darren, though exhausted, worked beside them. He carried stones, lifted beams, and forged weapons from the wreckage. His hands blistered, his body bruised, but he did not rest. Lyra watched him with a mix of pride and worry. Every night she cleaned his wounds, whispering strength into his ears when the weight of so many lives threatened to crush him. But in the high sky, aboard the alien command ship, the enemy plotted. The commanders knew destruction alone would not break this rebellion. If anything, each strike only hardened the humans' resolve. They needed to strike not with fire, but with cunning. Take the leader, one hissed in their harsh tongue. Crush their spirit by tearing him from them. So a trap was laid. The 5th night after the great battle, a small alien scouting party approached the valley. They came not in full force, but in disguise, carrying false banners of surrender. They spoke through translators, their voices strange but carrying words of peace. "We see your strength," they said. "We do not wish to destroy you further. Send your leader to us, and we will speak of peace." The villagers stirred with hope and doubt. Some begged Darren to go, desperate for rest. Others warned it was a trick. Darren listened in silence, his gaze steady. He knew the enemy's cruelty. Yet if there was even a chance to spare his people more suffering, he could not ignore it. Lyra gripped his arm. "Do not trust them. They want you alone." He looked into her eyes, seeing both her fear and her faith. "If I do not go, they will burn us again. If I go, perhaps I can buy time. You are not just yourself anymore," she whispered fiercely. "You are all of us. If they take you, they take our hope." But Darren had already decided. He kissed her forehead gently, then turned to the people. "If I do not return, you must not kneel. Promise me that." They swore it, their voices breaking, but none could stop him. At dawn, Darren walked out of the village toward the alien camp. His steps were steady, though his heart thundered. The invaders waited with their black banners fluttering, their armored figures lined like statues. A path opened for him, leading to a tall commander with eyes like burning coals. "You are the one they call leader?" the commander said. "I am just a man," Darren answered. The alien's lips curled into something close to a smile. "No, you are the spark. And sparks must be crushed before they become fire." In an instant, the false banners dropped, and chains of glowing energy wrapped around Darren's arms. He fought, his strength tearing against the bonds, but their power was too great. Villagers watching from afar screamed in rage as soldiers dragged him toward the ship. Lyra's cry cut through the valley. She ran forward, but others held her back. The ship's engines roared, and with a flash of light, Darren was gone, taken into the sky. The village fell silent, the sound of his capture heavier than the thunder of war. For a moment, despair hung thick, like a shadow pressing on every heart. The people looked at Lyra, uncertain, afraid. But Lyra stood tall, though her tears burned her cheeks. Her voice rang clear, steady as stone. "They have taken my husband, but they have not taken his spirit. We do not bow. We do not break. We fight until he returns, or we die standing." The villagers answered her with a roar, louder than before. The poor man was gone, but his courage lived on in them. And the invaders, watching from above, realized their trap had caught him, but perhaps, in doing so, they had made the fire burn even brighter. The alien ship was a prison of steel and shadows. Darren hung in chains that glowed with cold light, his arms stretched, his body bruised. Every breath was heavy, but his spirit remained unbroken. The commanders circled him, their strange eyes glowing in the dim chamber. They studied him like a beast caught in a cage. "You are nothing," one said, his voice echoing. "A poor man who defies empires. Why do they follow you?" Darren lifted his head, his voice raw but steady. "Because I do not bow." The alien struck him across the face, the blow sharp and cruel. Still, Darren did not fall silent. "You can chain me. You can break my body. But you cannot break what I've given them. They will fight without me." The commanders hissed in anger. They had crushed countless worlds, yet no prisoner had ever looked at them with such defiance. One leaned closer, his tone mocking. "Your people are weak. Without you, they will scatter. Watch." A screen flickered before him, showing the village below. Smoke still rose from the ruins, and the villagers struggled to rebuild. The aliens expected despair, but instead, Darren saw something else. Lyra stood before the people, her hands raised, her voice carrying strength. "They took Darren," she declared, "but they cannot take what he has given us. We are more than a village now. We are his fire." The people roared in answer, lifting their weapons high. Even in his chains, Darren smiled. His faith in them had not been misplaced. The commanders saw it too, and unease stirred among them. The spark was spreading, even without its bearer. Crushing him would not be enough. They had to break the very idea of him. They dragged him through corridors of metal, past cells filled with other prisoners from distant worlds. Eyes followed him, alien captives, broken and silent. Yet when they saw Darren walking tall even in chains, something flickered in their gaze. Hope. The aliens noticed and snarled. They locked him in a chamber alone, filled with strange machines. Energy hummed through the walls, designed to tear at his mind. Voices whispered. Illusions rose before his eyes, visions of Lyra broken, of his people kneeling, of everything he fought for turning to ash. Darren shut his eyes and whispered to himself, "We will not bow." The illusion shifted, but his voice cut through them. Again and again he repeated the words until the machines could not shake him. His will was a wall no torture could break. Meanwhile, in the valley below, Lyra led the people with steady courage. She trained beside them, carried stones, and shared their pain. Her presence gave them faith, and soon refugees from far-off lands came to join them. What began as one village grew into a gathering of many, but the alien fleet watched closely. They had Darren in their grip, and they prepared to use him as a weapon against his own people. If they could break him publicly, force him to kneel before their eyes, the fire would die. One night, Darren was dragged before the commanders again. The leader leaned close, his voice sharp as a blade. "Your people fight because of you. Kneel, and they will live. Refuse, and we will burn them all." Darren's body ached, his lips bled, but his eyes did not waver. "Burn the world if you must. My people have already chosen. And I will never kneel." The commander's hand trembled in rage. Few had ever dared defy him so. He struck Darren down, but even on the floor, the poor man laughed softly. It was not the laugh of madness, but of a man who knew that fate was shifting. Because even here, in the enemy's heart, he had planted something. The alien prisoners who saw him whisper now among themselves. The guards who chained him glanced at one another uneasily. His spirit was seeping into the cracks of their empire. And in the valley, under Lyra's voice, the people prepared not just to survive but to rise. In the valley, the people gathered under Lyra's voice. The ruins no longer looked like defeat, but like a foundation for something new. Men sharpened blades, women prepared food and bandages, and children carried water and messages across camps. Survivors from faraway towns joined them, drawn by the story of the poor man who defied the invaders. What began as a village had now grown into an army. Lyra stood before them each morning, her face tired but unbroken. She spoke not like a noble, but like one of them. They thought we would scatter without Darren. They thought taking him would break us. But we stand stronger because of him. We fight not for one man, we fight for all of us. Her words carried across the valley, and hearts hardened with resolve. The aliens above had not crushed them. They had only made them more dangerous. Meanwhile, aboard the alien ship, Darren's chains remained tight, but his spirit grew sharper. Guards dragged him through the prison halls, and again he saw the eyes of alien captives, beings from worlds long conquered. Most were broken, their faces hollow, but when they looked at him, they saw something they had forgotten. He walked tall, even in chains, and that was enough to remind them of freedom. One night, as he lay in his cell, a sound stirred in the shadows. From the corner, a voice whispered, low and rough, "Human." Darren lifted his head. Behind the bars of the cell opposite sat a tall alien with scales like iron and eyes glowing faintly blue. His body bore scars from countless battles. "They cannot break you," the alien said. "I have watched. You are different." "I am no different," Darren answered. "I only refuse to kneel." The alien gave a slow nod. "That is different enough." From then on, whispers spread through the prison. Beings who had long forgotten hope began to murmur his name. They told each other of the poor man who defied the commanders, who laughed even under chains. The guards grew uneasy, but they could not silence whispers carried in the dark. Back on the ground, Lyra faced her greatest test. Scouts reported that the aliens were preparing another strike, larger than any before. War machines gathered on the horizon, and ships hovered like vultures in the clouds. The people turned to her with fear, but also trust. She stood tall. "We will not wait for them to burn us again. This time we strike first," the villagers gasped. No one had ever spoken of attacking the invaders. They had always been the hunted, never the hunters. But Lyra's eyes blazed with the same fire as Darren's. Slowly, voices rose in agreement. Under her command, they planned raids. At night, small groups crept into alien camps, stealing supplies, cutting fuel lines, and striking quickly before vanishing into the dark. Each raid was small, but together they shook the enemy. For the first time, the invaders were forced to defend instead of attack. In the alien command ship, frustration boiled. The commanders snarled, unable to understand how mere villagers resisted so fiercely. They increased Darren's torment, dragging him before them. "Your woman leads them now," they mocked. "Soon she will fall, and so will they." But Darren only smiled through bloodied lips. "If she leads them, then you are already finished." The commander struck him down, yet unease gnawed at them. Their enemy had grown from one poor man into an entire people, and worse, other worlds might soon hear the tale. That night, the scaled alien in the cell opposite leaned closer. "Human, if freedom is what you seek, I will help you escape." "Many of us will." Darren's eyes lit with fire. "Then together, we will not only escape. We will end this." In the valley, Lyra prepared her people for the largest battle yet. In the ship above, Darren whispered with prisoners, planning the impossible, and though separated by distance, their hearts beat the same vow. "We will not bow." The sky burned again as the alien fleet gathered for their final strike. Their commanders had grown impatient. They had used fire, chains, and fear, yet the spark of rebellion refused to die. This time, they would end it completely. In the valley, Lyra stood before her people. The once mocked bride was now their leader, her dress long since torn and stained, her hands hardened by work and war. Yet in her eyes shone the same fire that first drew her to Darren. She raised her voice so all could hear. "They mocked me for loving a poor man. They mocked him for being nothing. But look at what that nothing has become. He gave us more than life. He gave us courage. Today, we show the invaders that we will never kneel." the roar of the people shook the ground. Farmers, mothers, children, every soul in the valley lifted their weapons high far above. In the alien prison, Darren's plan was ready. The scaled alien and others who had suffered under the commanders joined him. Guards fell in silence as the prisoners struck with stolen blades. Chains shattered, cells opened, and the halls filled with the cries of the once broken rising again. Darren moved like fire, his stolen spear cutting down those who stood in his way. His body was weak, scarred from torture, but his spirit carried him forward. He and his allies stormed the control chamber. The commanders turned in shock, their arrogance breaking at last. "You cannot win," one snarled. "I already have," Darren said. With a strike of his spear, he drove the enemy down. The others followed, tearing through the command center. Flames lit the ship as systems collapsed. Darren seized control and turned the ship not against his people, but against the invaders. From the valley, Lyra and her people saw the massive vessel tilt in the sky. For a moment, fear gripped them. Had Darren been broken, forced to lead destruction against them? Then, the ship's guns turned not toward the valley but toward the alien fleet. Beams of fire cut through the night, tearing warships apart. Gasps and cries filled the village. Lyra's tears shone in the firelight. "It's him," she whispered. The people roared as the fleet above broke under its own weapon. Alien warships exploded, flames scattering across the stars. The earth shook with the crash of burning metal, and for the first time, the sky was theirs again. When the smoke cleared, a smaller craft descended, landing on the torn earth of the valley. The people rushed forward as its doors opened. Out stepped Darren, scarred and weary, but alive. His eyes searched only for Lyra. She ran to him, her arms wrapping around him, her tears soaking his shoulder. "They took you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But they could not take us." Darren held her close, his voice soft but steady. "You were always stronger than me. You kept the fire alive." The villagers gathered, surrounding them, their faces filled with awe. This was the man they had mocked, the man they had called worthless. Now he was the one who had saved them all. And Lyra, once pitied for her choice, now stood as the woman whose love had changed the fate of a world. The survivors fell to their knees, not in fear but in respect. They chanted Darren's name, then Lyra's, then together as one. The alien empire had come to crush a poor man and his people. Instead, they had awakened something greater. The spark of defiance had become a fire that no fleet could put out. Other villages, other nations, and even other worlds would hear of it. And the empire would learn that a poor man with courage and a woman who believed in him could defy the stars themselves. Darren lifted Lyra's hand and raised it high for all to see. His voice rang out one last time, "We will never kneel." The people roared, their voices carrying into the heavens. And so, the story ended where it began, with a poor man and the woman who loved him. They had mocked her for her choice, but in the end, fate proved them all wrong. For together, they had given birth to freedom.